Senate Memorial 866, a memorial to the President of the United States and the Congress of the United States expressing profound disagreement with the decision of the President to restore full diplomatic relations with Cuba, opposing the opening of a consulate or any diplomatic office in this state, and urging the upholding of the embargo.
The Senator of the 37th District, Senator Flores, you are recognized on the memorial.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Members, after the decision was made to normalize and restore relations with Cuba, millions of Cubans, both on and off the island, reacted with anger, with disappointment, but mostly with sadness. And a lot of my friends and my colleagues have asked why we care so deeply. After all, of course, I've never been to Cuba. My parents both left when they were very young. So why do we care so much? So I will ask your indulgence today, members and members of the gallery, to go with us on a bit of a journey and hope to try and have you all understand why we care so deeply, why we feel so strongly about bringing true freedom to the people of Cuba. So my mom, at age 9, one day she went to school in the morning. They were living in Cuba. My mom's the oldest of 2 girls. She went to school in the morning. They had a split session. I'm sure maybe some of you had split session when you were growing up. So she went to school in the morning, put her uniform on. At lunchtime, came home, and my grandmother said, this afternoon, we're going to go on the ferry to Miami. Now, my mom was very precocious, but she didn't really find it too unusual because, after all, they went back and forth from Miami to from Cuba to Miami, Havana to Miami often. But what my mom didn't know is that my grandfather was actually in Miami at the time. He was doing some seasonal work, that he was watching the news of the way that the Castro revolution was being portrayed on American TV. His family had gone through an attempted communist takeover in Spain. So he recognized some of the warning signs. He called my grandmother and said, Violeta, you're going to have to bring the girls and come to Miami. So on that afternoon, my mom, her 6-year-old sister, and my grandmother got on the ferry, just like they did so many times. The difference was that this time, they didn't come back home. They landed in a new home that opened them and welcomed them with open arms, but they came with nothing but the clothes on their back. Now, I consider myself very lucky because everyone in Miami has a story of how did your parents or your grandparents come from Cuba. But I consider myself lucky because my story doesn't end with any family member being in a firing squad or spending years in prison for political crimes. And we can spend hours, we could spend days sitting here and talking and telling you about the stories and the lives that have been lost at the hands of the Castro brothers over the last 50 years. But rather than revisiting history, what I'd like to do today is talk about Cuba today. So what you have before you is a picture of a group of women known as the Ladies in White. Now, the Ladies in White are a group who peacefully march every single week in Havana, and they're marching for they're protesting the fact that their husbands, their sons are in prison for the crime of speaking their mind. But these mothers, these sisters, these aunts, every week when they do that, every single week, they are spit upon, they're beat up, they're harassed because they're trying to protest their sons, but they're spit upon by members of the Cuban government. The government authorizes that. And what they're doing is they're expressing their right to speak. But the fact is that in Cuba, there just are no rights. The government's recent deal to exchange Alan Gross. Alan Gross was a U.S. citizen. He was in prison in Cuba because he committed the unspeakable crime of trying to bring cell phones to Jewish dissidents on the island. The Cuban government did not care for that, and so they put Mr. Gross in jail. We're very grateful that he came back, but he was exchanged for criminals who were found guilty by our U.S. justice system for the crime of murdering 4 individuals on February 24th, 1996. Those 4 individuals, their justice was denied. Of those 4 individuals, 3 of them were U.S. citizens. 1 was a young man who was actually born in the United States. He wasn't even born in Cuba. 1 fought for our freedom in Vietnam. His sister, Anna, is with us today, and I appreciate you being here. I know it's emotional. But on February 24th, 1996, those 4 individuals, they departed from Miami in search of Cuban rafters. They were part of a group that every week went out over the Straits of Florida to look for rafters who were fleeing the island. Now, for a second, imagine the desperation that you have to be in, the desperation that you have to flee, that your only option is to get on a raft and to say, I'm just going to start going with the current, and maybe in 90 miles, I make it. Some of them do, many don't. So the Brothers to the Rescue, they were a group that went out on these freedom flights trying to find folks like this and bring them to the United States. Now, what I'm going to show you next is a video clip. This is a video clip of the Cuban government authorizing and celebrating the murder of 4 individuals who went out one morning just trying to save some people's lives.
I saw Mix coming by.
So you hear them congratulating each other and celebrating. 4 lives lost. The only closure that those families had was knowing that the perpetrators of that, those who orchestrated, were in jail, that justice had been served to them. But justice was stolen, and those 4 families feel betrayed, like so many of us do. So we're now dealing with a Cuban government that's responsible for many things. One of the things that they're responsible for is smuggling weapons to our known enemy of North Korea. They tried to smuggle them into sugar shipments. Those were found. Others may not have been found, but those are now the folks who we're dealing with. This is the same Cuban government that's responsible for denying basic freedoms to their people. And look, we're blessed to live in the best country in the world, a country that was founded on enshrining basic freedoms. The Cuban government does the opposite. They want to take away those freedoms from their people every day and at every moment. This is a place where their goal is to enshrine a system of apartheid, where visitors, where tourists can have it all. But residents are given a ration book, and every week they have to stand in line, and the government tells them what they can eat that week. Sometimes there's bread, sometimes there's not, sometimes there's milk, sometimes there isn't. Now, I know you've seen the pictures of the beautiful beaches and the hotels and where the tourists can go. No one that is a Cuban citizen can go to any of those places. This is a place where foreigners, where government elite can go to the very best hospitals, can go to have an amazing healthcare system, but where residents are told that they have to bring their own sheets, they have to bring their own light bulbs, and if they get to see a doctor, they'll wait for several months. This is a place where Fidel and Raul Castro, over the last 50 years, require their citizens to sit down and listen to them speak for 6, for 7 hours, but where just recently, after this deal was made, Tanya Bruguera, who is an artist, she's not a dissident, just a regular person. She got wind of this exchange, and she said, great, now we can get up and we can say something. She was arrested because she set up an open forum where Cubans could get up and speak for 3 minutes. Okay, so she set this up, and she was arrested on that morning. Of the 53 political prisoners that were released under this deal, at least 2 of them have already been rearrested. We know that for sure. Hundreds and thousands sit in prisons every day for having the gall of standing up and saying something. This supposed new and modern Cuba, this is a place where peaceful women every week who try and protest and speak for their families, this is what they're met with. This happens every week. And the most amazing thing is they know what they're going to face. They know what they're going to face, and they don't care. They get up every day, every week, those that didn't get arrested that week, and they go and do that. Because, look, in this country, we understand that freedom comes with a price. We understand that. Several in this room have fought for that freedom. Many have family members who have died for that freedom. But what we should demand is that that freedom should cost more than some rum or a couple of Cuban cigars. Why should we demand that? Because of us, if us here in this room, those of us who have been elected to speak for those who can't speak for themselves, if we don't stand for freedom, then who will? Thank you, Mr. President.
Are there further comments? Further comments? Senators, pursuant to Rule 4.13, this we're going to roll this and then on a voice vote. All those in favor of the Senate Memorial signify by saying aye. Aye. Oh, I apologize. Leader Joyner, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I feel your pain and your passion, Senator Flores, and I think that of all the people here in the chamber, I best can empathize, because the freedom that I enjoy was earned by the hard work of many whose shoulders I stand on. But the Obama administration took its historic steps to chart a new course in the United States' relations with Cuba. We're only separated by 90 miles of water, but we are brought together through the relationships between the 2 million Cubans, and Americans of Cuban descent that live in this country, and the millions of Cubans who share similar hopes for a more positive future for Cuba. This humanitarian policy embraced by the President, Pope Francis, and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops extends the light of liberty through the hand of friendship in an effort to heal the split among American brothers. And I know in my heart that there was no malice intended by the promulgation of this policy by the Obama administration. And I know that his moving this forward is an effort to bring freedom to the Cuban people, to bring freedom so that those of us who live in this country who are Cuban and otherwise will all have an opportunity to respect, worship, and love each other as brothers and as human beings in this country. and I support the President's historic steps in promulgating this humanitarian policy.
Senator Garcia for remarks.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I wasn't going to speak because Senator Flores did an excellent job. And thank you, Senator Flores, for bringing this resolution and trying to educate not only this chamber, but Florida and this nation as to the issues that have surrounded our people only 90 miles away for so long. And when this new order came from the White House, and a lot of my friends said, well, Renee, what's the big deal? Does it make a difference? And let me tell you something, why it is such a big deal. If by the president's order, when the president came out with this order, things would change on the island, I would say, I congratulate the president. I congratulate the president in making something happen. But nothing, those Cubans on that island woke up the same way they woke up yesterday. And they will wake up the same way tomorrow. Nothing will change as a result of this policy shift with the island of Cuba. And I'll tell you as personal experience. Some of my friends tell me, Renee, again, why are you so passionate about this issue? Members, I have woken up every Christmas day in my house talking about the issues of Cuba. Having my father embed in me and in my brother how freedom is so fragile and how lucky I am to be in this country and to live in this democratic system that we call the U.S., the United States of America. And that every day, now that I'm a little older, and when I'm up here, my father always tells me, you need to continue to fight because we lost it from one day to the next. And if we don't fight for those freedoms today, we can lose them tomorrow. And that's why it is so important for us to educate all of us, all of you, about the tragedies that have happened in Cuba. And I'll give you one little personal note as well. My uncle, Antonio Capiro, who was a radio commentator in Cuba, because of his political beliefs on the island, right after the revolution, spoke up against that administration, served 10 years in one of Castro's prisons, did not see his children for that amount of time. And yet you tell me that we're doing the right thing by opening up relationships with Cuba when they yet are to open up any dialogues with us and free those prisoners that they have in their prisons, talk about freedom of speech, freedom of the press. We just passed a resolution on the floor now addressing the issues that are happening in Turkey as it relates to freedom of the press. And yet in Cuba, they lack all of that. And yet we think that we should just continue along and think that by us opening up dialogue that things are going to change. It will not change. And I'll tell you, and I look at all of you, and I ask you to stand together with us. Stand together with us and stand together with those millions of people that are oppressed on an island that's only 90 miles away from the United States of America. And send a message to this administration that we understand the plight and the problems that they're facing, and that we must continue to put the pressure on the Castro regime to open up and be transparent, just how this country is. So, Senator Flores, thank you very much. Thank you for bringing this to this attention, making this a priority for this Senate. And God bless you for what you're doing, because for far too long, we have said, you know, let's keep it quiet. Let's keep it quiet. Let's not talk about this. But now that we're talking about it, it's out there and it's transparent and it's our position. And we ask you to stand together in solidarity with us and help those millions of Cubans that are on that island that are still oppressed. Mr. President, thank you for the time, and members, thank you for your patience in indulging us with this resolution.
Senator Diaz de la Portilla, you are recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I'd like to commend Senator Flores and Senator Garcia, my two younger colleagues, for their very effective presentation of what is the reality in Cuba today and what reality tells us will happen tomorrow and the day after, as long as the Castro dons, the two mafia dons that rule Cuba, remain in power. These octogenarian despots have been in power, power that they stole in 1959 for 56 years now. They are the illegitimate rulers of an island nation. They stole power, they stole property. Today, the French and Italian and Spanish hotels that you see are built on stolen property. In my personal case, I was born at Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami, but my parents came over when they were 21, and they had their youth stolen by the two octogenarian dictators 90 miles away from Florida's coast. We've had relatives who have been imprisoned. My granduncle, my grandmother's only brother, Manuel Garcia y Sanchez, was killed simply because he asked for free elections. So since 1959, you have these two stubborn dictators who stole power, who have not changed a thing since 1959. In fact, the country has gone backward by every single indicator of progress that we have in the world. Production of tobacco, production of sugar, human rights, everything has gone in the wrong direction. And to think naively that by sending American cash so that Americans can buy Cuban cigars and Cuban rum and vacation in those hotels that are on stolen property, that somehow if a McDonald's or a Starbucks opens over there, that these two obstinate octogenarian dictators and their cronies, same people that have been with them since the very beginning, since 1959, are going to change anything, is naive at best. And perhaps there are some, like our president, who may have acted with good intentions, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Because the influx of cash that the Castro brothers and their oppressive regime are going to get from Americans will only ensure that the Castro brothers and their capos maintain control of the island of Cuba, which they treat as their own farm. They decide who can go to school and what you can study, where you can work, what you can do, where you can go. And they're going to continue to do the same. The very same day that our president announced what he called a new day and a new policy, Raul Castro, now 85, said, let me make it clear. We're not going to change anything. We're not going to betray our principles. And what are the Castro's brothers' principles? Oppression, dictatorship, lack of human rights, murder, stealing property, shipping weapons to North Korea, participating in state terrorism, subverting American interests all over our hemisphere and beyond, as far as the African continent and everywhere else that they could. This policy will do nothing but ensure that the Castro regime, this new policy, will ensure that the Castro regime stays in power for a little longer. And as a result, the Cuban people will continue to suffer. And so what we ask from you today is just solidarity. We know our cause because we've lived it either directly or indirectly through our parents, our brothers, our sisters, our uncles, our aunts, our grandparents. And we ask for you to stand in solidarity, stand with us, stand for freedom, stand against oppression, and stand for what we all share as American values, human rights. Please support us in this resolution. It's important to us because nothing has changed on that island for 56 years, and it's not going to change just because some Americans can now buy cigars and rum. Thank you.
Further comments? Members, we will handle this on a voice vote, but before we do, Senator Joyner, you mentioned that Cuba was only 90 miles away. The reality is it's a world apart. And Senator Flores, thank you for bringing this forward. As President of the Senate, we have the opportunity to sign many resolutions and various things, but when this gets to my desk, I'm going to be proud to sign it. And I'm proud to stand with you and the other members of the Miami-Dade delegation. All those in favor of the Senate Memorial signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Show one objection. Take up and read the next bill.